right? You want to be able to find the vertical and horizontal asymptotes. And the zeros. So the vertical come from setting your denominator equal to 0. So sometimes you're factoring there, and then you'd get x equals whatever, x equals whatever. Those would be your vertical asymptotes. I'll give you problems in a second, but this is just kind of the overall concepts. For horizontal, there were 3 cases. So if the exponent in the top, so this is it would look like f of x equals x to the n over x to the m. If n is greater than m, then there's no horizontal asymptote. If n is equal to m, then it's y equals the leading coefficient of the numerator over the leading coefficient of the denominator. And if n is less than m, then y equals 0 is your horizontal asymptote. Again, I'll give you examples of each of those, but then the zeros come from setting your numerator equal to 0. And again, another topic you are going to see in pre-calc next year. So these kinds of questions would look like f of x equals 3x over, x plus 5. Or f of x equals x squared minus 4 over x squared. Actually, let's do x plus 3. Or f of x equals x plus 1 over x squared minus 16. So if I were to do the same thing, find the vertical asymptotes, the horizontal asymptotes, and the zeros of each of these, they will be divided up into separate questions, but we can do them for each of them. For the first one, for the vertical asymptotes, we're going to, first of all, you want to factor and make sure they can't cancel out. That happens if that was a hole. There's not going to be a hole in your graph, but that is part of what you should do in general. So, I mean, not on your final, there's not going to be a hole. But for these, if I'm trying to find the vertical asymptotes, I'm going to set my denominator equal to 0, and I'm going to solve for x, and I'd get x equals -5. And that would be my vertical asymptote. For the horizontal asymptote, you're going to look at the exponent in the numerator and the exponent in the denominator. They are the same. So this is that leading coefficient case. I do y equals the leading coefficient, which is the number on the front of the one with the variable that was raised to the first power. That's a 3. Over the leading coefficient in the denominator, that's the number on the front of the variable that's raised to the highest power, which is 1. So y equals 3 would be my horizontal asymptote. And then for the zeros, you set your numerator equal to 0. So if 3x equals 0, x would equal 0. And for these, we list them. So it would just say like x equals 0. If there's more than one, it would be 0, comma something. We don't need the x equals with that one. For the other two, these are equations. So you have to have the x equals and the y equals. So these, again, these would be a list of just the value that it's equal to. Do you remember this? It's been a little while. Yeah. All right, if I go to the second one, so questions on that one. If I go to the second one, first of all, I would check to see if I factor. If it cancels out, it's not gonna, so you're fine. I set my denominator equal to 0, and I get x equals -3, and that's my vertical asymptote. I look at the highest exponent in the top, the highest exponent in the bottom. This time, top is more than bottom. So there is no horizontal asymptote. There's a slant if you remember those, but that's not part of your test. And then the zeros would come from your numerator. So I would set this equal to 0. X squared would equal 4. Square root both sides, putting a plus and minus in front of the 4. And I get x equals plus and minus 2. So my zeros are -2 and +2. Okay, then this last one. So for vertical asymptotes, I'm going to set my denominator equal to 0. You can factor this or use your even root to solve it. Either way, you end up with 2 vertical asymptotes. One at x equals -4 and one at x equals +4. This time, the highest exponent in the top is 1, highest exponent in the bottom is 2. So my horizontal asymptote is y equals 0, because if it's more in the top, it's y equals 0. And to find my zeros, I set my numerator equal to 0. So if x plus 1 equals 0, then x equals -1. So the highest, you want to look at the highest exponent in the top and the highest exponent in the bottom. If the one in the top, that one is less than the one in the bottom, that's when it's y equals 0. If they're the same, we do the leading coefficients. If the one in the top is more, there is no horizontal asymptote. And be careful with your answer choices, because it will say like vertical asymptote, y equals 0. Horizontal asymptote, x equals. That's wrong, right? The verticals have to be the x equals and the horizontals have to be the y equals. So the asymptotes are grouped together in a question. Find the vertical and the horizontal asymptote. That's together in a question. And then find the zeros would be a separate question. Be really careful. I mean, especially multiple choice, right? It's either like all or nothing. So be really, really careful when you're making your picks. One, be smart about it. Because if you just had, let's say this was my vertical asymptote, and there was only one of my 5 choices that has that answer, I don't even have to look at my horizontal asymptote. So there's going to be times when you can narrow down your answer choices based on the first part of your question. If it's like a, matrix multiplication and the first row doesn't get repeated, then that's an easy way to eliminate a lot of work. So I would just say keep that in mind. Questions on these? Okay. Then you need to add classifying a conic. So this is for, I think it's for 3. Hang on, let me check that. The standard form of a conic. Oh, I have it open here. It's actually 4. So this is where you want to look at the a is whatever's in front of the x squared. The c is whatever's in front of the y squared in your equation. If they are the same, so if a equals c, then it's a circle. If one of them is missing, so the product of them is 0, then it's a parabola. If they are not the same, but their product is greater than 0 or it's positive, then it's an ellipse. And if their product is less than 0 or negative, then it's a hyperbola. It's the semicolon. I'll put an arrow. What's A? What's the A in that equation? 3. What's the C? -4. So what kind of conic is this? Hyperbola. What's B? Classify the second one. It's a circle. Both A and C are 5, right? And the last one would be? Ellipse. And if it was this, actually, it could even have a y. So let's do 4y minus 10 equals 0. That would be what? Parabola. I was going to say hint. It's the only one left. There's no y squared, right? So if there's no y squared or no x squared, then it's a parabola because you only have 1. So add these. What number did it come? Your test is Wednesday. Yeah, so there's no school tomorrow because of graduation. There's no school Monday because it's Memorial Day. Tuesday is your last full day, and it is slated as an AC review day. So usually they elongate A and C a little bit so we have more time together. And then Wednesday is just AC.
Because on Canvas it says it's the 8th.
It says